Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about, and I do have a few interesting ones for you. Especially this first one because I think it was just last week someone mentioned in my comments that they keep coming back just to check if there are any new Awaken Realms games coming out, and this update is for you because they just announced that their Grim Coven campaign is going to be launching in just 12 days, and that puts us for June 6th. And if you're not familiar with this game yet, this is the next game from Awaken Realms, but this one's going to be a boss battler where players are going to be playing as different characters with their own asymmetric abilities, going up against all sorts of different bosses. And of course, in that traditional Awaken Realms fashion, all the artwork and miniatures are going to look fantastic. But I won't get into all the details of the game right now, so if you do want to learn more about this one, make sure to subscribe down below and I will have you covered during the week of its launch. Other than that, we just got a launch date announcement for the game Odalin Dungeons of Doom, which I did just mention recently, but this is the next game coming from Jagori Games that created Arena the Contest, as well as Tenaris Adventure, and they did also release a RPG in that same universe, and I am a backer of all of that. So naturally I am really interested in this one and to see what they've learned from those great games that they've already created and what they might do to either iterate on that or go in a completely new direction with this game. I haven't looked a whole lot into this one just yet, but they do have their campaign up if you do want to check it out for yourself. But once again, I will be covering this one in a lot more detail during the week of its launch, so just make sure to subscribe if you do want to learn more. And we are getting near the end of the month here, which means that Alex over at Boardgame Co is going to be putting up his video very soon going over the month of June and letting you know of the heavy hitters for that month. If you're not familiar, Alex and I do work together keeping track of all these campaigns so that he can provide you with that video, but then I give constant updates each and every week going into all the games that we know about and letting you know of any updates. So if you do want to get a quick overview for the month of June, make sure to check him out. Plus he also has a ton of other great content as well. That's it for an intro, and we do got quite a lot of games launching this week, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on May 28th, and this one's going to be offering you 4 different lighter weight games, but they're each going to be offering very different playstyles. Big Sur is a competitive card drafting game where players are going to be drafting different road cards in order to build roads of different terrain types and to collect different sets of cards in order to score victory points at the end of the game. The neat thing about this is that each of these road cards are going to require a certain amount of different types of resources in order to build that card into your display, and in order to pay those resources, you're going to have to discard other cards matching those resources. This means that you're going to be using these cards either to build that section of the road or to pay for the section of road that you're building. As you're building out your road, you'll also gain access to different landmark cards that you'll be able to place above your road in order to add either some special abilities or scoring objectives that can gain you additional victory points at the end of the game. The player with the most victory points at that point wins the game, and you can find out more on this game in the description down below. Grand Central Skyport is a competitive game where players are each managing their own Skyport, and the goal here is to attract different airships of different colors. You're going to be placing these next to your Skyport, with the first one you place having a color requirement according to your port. Beyond that, you can draft any colors that you want, but you are trying to get like colored airships together, because if you're able to do that, you will be able to stack them together, which increases their victory point potential. The catch here is that each time that you add a ship into your port, it's going to be rearranging your existing ships there in some way, so you're going to be trying to get the ships that work in your favor. Of course, getting the ships you want may not be as easy as it sounds because you are competing with the other players by drafting different cards from a rondel. So depending on your position on that rondel, it might determine how easy a certain card is to get than another. And if that card's farther away, it's likely that another player might get to it first. Luckily, there are these tycoon cards that players can also access throughout the game, and whenever you get one of those, they might grant you with a personal scoring objective that can give you more opportunities to gain victory points, or they could also grant you with unique abilities that you could take advantage throughout the game. At the end of the game, the player with the most victory points wins the game. Standard is a competitive move and write game where players are going to be taking actions through action movement, but the whole goal here is to fill in your bottle with different types of sand art in order to score victory points at the end of the game. There's a bunch of different objectives that could appear from game to game. You're going to be trying to get the appropriate colors and then place those in the appropriate locations in order to maximize the amount of these cards that you're going to be able to score. Like I said, in order to do this, you're going to be using action movement, and the way that works is you're going to have have a bunch of different cards with different actions available on them. You're going to be moving your pawn down that linear track, taking advantage of the actions that you want to use. These actions are going to allow you to gain a certain amount of sand of certain colors. You'll be able to track that on your board. Then there's also actions that allow you to mix different colors of sand together to form new colors. And of course, there is an action to pour a bottle of sand into your bottle to start forming your patterns. And as you might have guessed, you're going to be filling your bottle from the bottom up. And depending on the height that you make it in your bottle, that's going to be earning you a certain amount of victory points. But something that's interesting here is that there is diminishing returns the higher up that you go, but as you do move up, you're also going to be gaining access to an ability. The player with the most victory points from filling up their bottle and then also completing those different objective cards is going to be the winner of the game. Wine Cellar is a competitive game where players are filling in a wine cellar for a particular client. Each player is going to be assigned a client card at the beginning of the game, and it's going to be giving them additional victory points depending on the wines that they are able to put into their cellar. What's interesting about this is that the order that you put them into the cellar is going to dictate the order that those wines are going to be consumed. And of course, some wines are better with age, so depending on the wine bottles that you're putting into that cellar, you're going to want to put them into an order where they're consumed at the best time, scoring you the most victory points at the end of the game. In this example, you can see this player did a fantastic job of that because the game plays over 8 rounds, which means that there's 8 different wines to add to that cellar, and each of the values in the columns of the different wine bottles indicate the amount of victory points that they're going to give you depending on their location in the cellar. The most points you get for a bottle is 8 points, so you can see that they put their bottles in an order to get that number 8 value as close as possible to correlate with the row that it's in. So the first one has the 8 in the first spot, and the 8th one has the 8 in the final spot. They weren't able to get everyone lined up with the corresponding value, but that is the challenge of the game. If you want to learn more, I'll have links to this campaign in the description below where you can check out all 4 games, and don't forget that you can subscribe if you want to get notified once it launches. Also launching on May 28th, we have Tales of Realms and Ruins, and this one is a really interesting competitive area control and deck building game. And the thing that makes this game so unique is the way that the 3 realms work out on this board and the way that they change almost every aspect of this game. And I'll get into that in a second here, but first I'll just let you know the win conditions of this game, and this is something that ties into those 3 realms, because you can either win the game by just controlling those 3 realms, but each of these realms is also going to have a set of their own cards that players will be able to purchase throughout the game in order to add to their deck, and the end of the game will be triggered as soon as any one of those 3 decks are depleted, but the win condition of the game is going to be changing depending on which deck that is. One realm might award the win to whoever has the most gold at the end of the game, whereas the others might award the win for having the most followers or the most cards in your possession. But in addition to all these different win scenarios, there's also a scenario where all the players can lose the game, because this game also features a shared enemy, and as players are taking their actions, there's going to be different events that occur that cause enemy units to be put out on the different regions of the board, and if there are more enemy units on a region than there are any other player, then that region's going to be flipped to its corrupted side, and if all 3 of the regions end up in that state, then the enemy wins the game and all the players lose. But each player is going to be playing as a hero with their own unique board and strengths, as well as a skill tree that players will be able to upgrade as they play throughout the game. And in a round, players are going to be taking turns performing 2 actions. They can either use that action to play a card from their hand, paying any associated costs, but this might allow that player to gain gold, gain followers in the different regions of the board, which does gain them influence and control over that region, but they can also use those cards to buy other cards, draw more cards from their deck, remove enemies from the board, or even move their hero to a different realm. And the reason that you might want to do that is that you can only buy cards from the realm where your hero is located, and each of the realms has their own set of cards like I explained before, and they'll each have their own theme. But another interesting difference between the realms here is that the cost of that card is going to be different depending on the realm that you're in. One realm might require you to pay gold, where another might require you to sacrifice some of your followers or even sacrifice some of your cards. Anytime a card is purchased, you're going to be revealing the next one from the deck, and each of these cards will also have a potential effect that could occur at that time. This could add enemies to different regions, or could present the player with a particular decision, and depending on that decision, it can have game-changing effects. But the really nice thing about getting the most followers out in a region is that whichever player is able to do that is also going to be able to gain access to that region's specific special ability. If that's currently you, then that is another option for one of your actions, but you can also use an action to train your hero and start adding tokens to your skill tree, making you a little bit more powerful for the rest of the game. But the game continues like this until a single player controls all 3 regions, or one of those decks is completely depleted, or alternatively, the enemy controls all 3 regions, and in that case, all players lose the game. But if you want to learn more about this one, you can check it out, and I'll have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 28th, we have the second edition for AVghost Paranormal Investigation. And this one is a very unique cooperative game because this one is actually designed to be played completely in the dark. Players are going to be playing as unique investigators with unique items and abilities that get unlocked based on the health that your character currently has. But the game also offers a bunch of different scenarios that are going to be all presented through a case file, which are going to feature different win and loss conditions, as well as special components like maps, photos, and reports. And players are going to be trying to find different clues within these reports and then associate them with the clues that they find out on the board. In order to facilitate all this, the game does offer an app that you're going to be using to keep track of your branching storyline, and it's also going to present a number of clues to each of the players that they're going to have to try and investigate. The way this game manages to still function in the dark is that each of your character miniatures are also going to be accompanied with a base that features a little flashlight, and what's neat about this is that there are a bunch of different filters that you can swap in and out of your flashlight that are useful in different situations. The main enemies you're going to be running into are a bunch of different types of ghosts, and each of the ghosts are going to be weak to a certain spectrum of light. So you're going to need to use actions to put that spectrum into your flashlight, and then use an action to attack that ghost. The issue here is that when you do attack a ghost, your filter is also destroyed in that attack, so you're going to have to put it back to the central supply, and then you're going to have to use actions or find some way to get that filter back into your supply later, hopefully taking advantage of the help of your fellow players in order to kill any other ghosts that might need that filter in the meantime. The main board is going to be set up with a bunch of different tiles depending on the scenario, but another really interesting detail with the components here is that you also have a bunch of these clear sheets, and they're going to have different icons and points of interest on them, and depending on the scenario, you're going to be laying one of those clear sheets over each of the tiles. This provides variability with the different boards, even if they're used across different scenarios, but these are going to provide the different points of interest that players are going to have to interact with to discover their clues. The cool thing here is that a lot of these points of interest are color-coded, and the only way that a player can actually use an action to interact with it is if they have the appropriate spectrum of light in order to see it. But the game continues like this until the players either complete their win condition or a loss condition is reached, either defined in the scenario or if they are defeated by those ghosts. If you're interested, check out more. I will have this one linked in the description down below. Also on the 28th, we have Galactic Shogun, and this one is a social deduction game where players are playing as futuristic shogun and ninjas. At the start of the game, players are going to be dealt a hand of cards as well as a roll card indicating their win condition at that point in the game. If you're the Galactic Shogun, then you win if all the other cards are played without you being revealed, but if you're the Protectorate, then you win if the Shogun wins. And then if you're any of the ninjas, you're going to be winning if you're able to reveal the Shogun, and then if you're an Ascendant, then you win if you are revealed rather than the Shogun. And the turns in this game played pretty simply. Players are just going to be playing a card from their hand and then resolving its effects. And this can allow you to do different things like different abilities to look at other players' roll cards, swap roll cards between players, or reveal another player by playing the katana on them. Of course, unless they have a hologram card where they can deny that from happening. But something that makes this game different than a lot of other social deduction games out on the market is the fact that you're able to swap roles with other players. This means that not only are you trying to reveal the appropriate player at the appropriate time in order to trigger that win condition, but you can also manipulate your role to make sure that when you think a certain condition is going to be hit, you can have the appropriate role. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely check this one out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. Also launching on the 28th, we have Shrinkopolis, and this one is a competitive tile placement game where players are going to be drafting cards from a central area. And what's interesting about this is all these cards are going to be in a circle, and they're going to be alternating between a city card and a reward card. Players are always going to be drafting 2 adjacent cards at a time, which means that you're always going to be getting one of each. But you'll be able to place the city tile into your own personal city area, matching different icons in order to score different sets, and then also to attract different different animals because you'll be able to gain victory points in a bunch of different ways depending on those reward cards that you get. This means that players will be able to accumulate different personal objectives throughout the game, but there are also some shared objectives that players are trying to achieve as well. The game plays over 8 rounds, and as players are drafting those cards and placing them into their supply, they're going to be gaining resources depending on the icons that they're able to match together, and the resources come in 3 different types represented by different colored dice. The value on the die represents the amount of that resource that you have, and on your turn you can spend as much of that as you like in order to purchase additional reward cards that can either give you more scoring opportunities or grant you with special abilities that you'll be able to use throughout the game. After a player's turn, the cards are always replenished, and then the game continues like this over 8 rounds, and the player with the most victory points at that point wins the game, and if you want to learn more, you can check this one out. I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 28th, we have Puppets in High Places, and this one is a 2-player game that takes place on 2 different boards. There's the Speakeasy board that has all these different dice on it, then there is a main board where players are going to be using a rondel system to take different actions throughout the game. I'll come back to that one in just a second here, but first I want to explain how the Speakeasy board works because this is the main way that you're going to be earning victory points throughout the game. There's going to be a bunch of different dice rolled and then put out on this board, and the value of the die indicates the amount of points that die will grant you if you're able to pull it completely to your side. Players will be earning and spending tokens of different colors in order to manipulate the different colored dice. But there's also actions that players can take advantage of on the rondel board in order to manipulate this board as well. Anytime a player is able to pull a die to their side and score that die, it's going to be removed from the board, and once enough dice are removed, all the dice are going to be gathered up, rolled again, and then put back out on the board, essentially resetting that board back to where it started. Of course, any points that you've earned do carry forward, and the goal of the game is to be the first player to score 25 points. But like I said, there is another board here where players are going to be using a rondel system in order to take various actions throughout the game, and this board represents a set of streets, and players are going to be moving a car around that board in a clockwise fashion in order to take various actions. Wherever you stop your car, you're going to be able to place one of your meeples at that location, and each of the locations is going to require a certain amount of meeples on it in order to perform that action. This means that players are essentially moving that car around in order to prep for the actions that they want to take by getting the appropriate meeples in the appropriate spots. The meeples do accumulate at the center of the cards, so as you're moving that car around the track, whether it's at the top or the bottom of a particular action card, you're still going to be contributing meeples to the center, meaning that you don't have to go all around the entire track in order to interact with the same card. But the different actions you'll be able to do is gain those various tokens, manipulate the Speakeasy board in different ways, and then also activate that Speakeasy phase where you'll be able to spend tokens in order to push those dice towards your side of the board. And you're going to want to do this when you're in a better position than your opponent, so activating that Speakeasy phase is a calculated decision. But the game continues like this until a player reaches 25 points and then they win the game, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And also launching on May 28th, we have the next game offered from Button Shy Games, but this one is actually a little more than a game because this one is actually a whole system that supports a wide variety of games ranging from 1 to 4 players. There's already a ton of different games here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they add more in the future, but I'll just start by explaining the ones that I'm aware of, starting from the lower player counts up to the higher player counts, and I have already played several of these because I actually have the copy of the game here sitting right in front of me. And the first thing to know about this system is, like all the other Button Shy games, this is offering you a lot of game with only a few cards. The cards in this game are of 3 different elements, with one element being stronger and weaker than another, and the front of each of these cards is going to feature one of those elements and then a value from 2 to 6. Each of the suits also has a card with a diamond in place of the number, and these operate a little differently from game to game. And the first game I have set up here for you is called the 9 Perils, and this one is a solo game. And the way this works is that you just shuffle all the cards, then you deal 9 out in a row, and then you're going to be flipping the card in the middle. You're then going to have your draw deck, and you can either draw 1, 2, or 3 cards depending on the difficulty. And the more cards you have, the easier it is, but I'm going to draw just 2 because I do like a more difficult game. The goal of this game is to play cards into your own row beneath these cards so that each of your cards beats the corresponding card in this existing row. There's a few ways you can do that, but if you're playing a card of the same element, then it's the higher value that wins that column. And if you play a card of a stronger element, it's going to give you a +1 to the value of the card, but if you play one that's weaker, it's going to be granting you a -1 to your value. Each turn I'm going to be drawing a card from the top of the deck and adding that to my hand, and then I will be able to reveal any of these cards that I want to reveal. I'll just choose the next one here, and then I can play a card from my hand into any of the columns. Like I said, I always have to beat the existing card here, so if I'm not able to do that, then that's going to potentially lose me the game. Since fire is stronger than earth, then this is going to give me a +1 to my value of the card, which means that this is essentially a 5, which defeats this card. The rounds just continue like this, with drawing another card and then flipping a card, and then playing another card from my hand. Just like the previous card I played, I can play an equal value but of a stronger suit in order to beat that column. And we'll just continue with drawing another card. I don't know why I keep drawing fire here, but we'll just roll with it. And I'll use this as an opportunity to show you some caveats to the rules, because I can actually go ahead and play this card here to cause a tie. Since fire is weaker than water, this is essentially a 2, but anytime that you have a tie, the tie's outcome is determined by the card 2 cards to the right. Not only that, but the outcome of this column also dictates the outcome of the cards between them. So we'll just go into the next round here. I'll draw another card into my hand and then reveal the next card. And whenever these cards show up with the diamond on it, that means that they always win against the suit that they're strong against, but they always lose against the suit that they're weak against. So all I have to do to win that is play an earth card of any value. So I'll just play the one that I happen to have in my hand, which is a 5. So not only do I win that column, but I also win this tie, and I'm automatically going to win this one in the middle, no matter which card I put here. So let's draw the next card and flip another card in the row here. Then I'll just go ahead and play this low fire card in this column, because it doesn't really matter what I play there, I'm always going to win. Then the game continues like this until you have put a card in every column. And if you're able to do this without losing to any of the cards in the opponent row, then you win the game. But even if you lose to a single column, that's going to cost you the game, and you're going to have to do better next time. And the next solo game in the system uses the same existing deck, but then it also incorporates an expansion deck that's also included in the system. Each of these cards is going to have a riddle in the center, which has certain requirements in order to fulfill it, and these cards are double-sided, granting a lot of variety from game to game. This game is called Cave of the Djinns, and the way that you win this is by solving each of the 6 riddles, and the way that you're doing that is by drawing cards from this deck, then placing them in such a way that you're meeting the requirements of each of the riddles. Each of these cards also has a reward that you can optionally do if you're able to complete that riddle, and once a riddle's solved, you're going to be covering it with one of the cards adjacent to it that is stronger than the element depicted on that card. If you don't have a card around it that meets that requirement, then you're going to be drawing the card from the top of the deck and then covering it with that card instead. Of course, it is nicer to use one of the cards that you've already placed, because that's going to allow you to open up that space, which will make solving the other riddles a little bit easier. But the way this works is I'm going to be drawing 2 cards into my hand each turn, and then I have to place both of these cards. I can place them in any of the spaces that's adjacent to one of the Djinn cards, which means that I can place a card above this one, below it, or to the left or the right, and that goes for any of the cards out on the table here. I ended up drawing 2 cards with a 3 on it, and this top card actually wants 3 cards of the same value. So I'll just go ahead and place this on either side of that card. One thing I do need to be aware of is that this card wants cards of all the same element around it, so I've locked myself in with fire. But this works well because this is a grass element, which means I will be able to remove one of those once I complete that riddle. And this Djinn just wants odd valued cards around it, so the 3 works well for that. And this is also a water element, which means the grass is strong to it, which will give me the option to remove that card once I complete that riddle. So let's go ahead and draw 2 more cards here. One of my cards was a 6 of fire, which I'll go ahead and play here because it matches this element, which this Djinn wants. And then this Djinn wants all high valued cards around it of either a 5, a 6, or a diamond, so that works well with the 6. And since I have this diamond card, I'll just go ahead and play it right here. 2 more cards. And I did get a 5 here, so I'll just go ahead and play that down here. And this 2 doesn't do much for me, but I'll just go ahead and place it here for now. And now things are getting really interesting because these 2 cards are really going to help me complete some of these Djinn requirements. So I'll just go ahead and throw this 3 up here because this one does want 3 of the same valued card around it, but it does also need this one filled in before we can actually complete that riddle. But I'll go ahead and throw the 6 down here, which completes this Djinn down in the bottom right corner. If you're paying attention, you've probably noticed that by doing this, I also messed up my situation with this card since it wants suits of all the same type around it. but I will fix that in just a second here, because now that I've completed this Djinn card, I can go ahead and use its reward action, which allows me to switch any 2 cards around it. So I'll just go ahead and swap these 2 cards, and I know that doesn't quite make sense just yet, but bear with me here, because now that I've completed that riddle and I've performed its action, I now have to cover that card, and I can cover it with any card around it that is stronger than the element depicted on that card, which means I can take this water card since it's stronger than fire, and then cover up this card, indicating that that riddle has been completed, while also simultaneously freeing the space back up for a fire card that I can put there later to try and complete this riddle. I really like this one a lot, and I'd love to continue playing this one through, but I think this gives you a good enough of an idea of how this game plays, and it would just continue until I was able to cover up all the Djinn, and if I wasn't able to, then I would lose the game. But now let's move into how the 2-player game offered with the system works, and this one is called the Scorcerer Showdown. The way this game plays is that at the start of the game, each player is going to be dealt a hand of 8 cards, and then this game is going to be going through a series of rounds using trick-taking, where players are trying to win various clashes by playing a card from each of their hands, and trying to win every single trick in that round. The interesting thing here is that at the start of each round, each player gets to discard any 2 cards from their hand, but they will be getting those into their next hand if the game moves into a following round. If that happens, players pick up those 2 cards that they just put off to the side, then they're going to be drawing up to 7 cards, because each round you're going to be drawing up to 1 less than the previous round, which is a really interesting mechanism because it makes it a little bit easier to win the game, since you have to win every trick in a round in order to win the game. And of course, less cards means less tricks to win that round. You might also want to consider this when deciding which 2 cards to put off to the side, because you know you're going to be getting them in the following round. So if you decide to put really high cards here, that might be a good strategy to set you up for the next round, especially once you get into those smaller hand counts. But that also means you're sacrificing those high cards for the current round, which could give your opponent the win if you're not timing that appropriately. But the way this works is that one of the players is going to go first, and I'll just go ahead and let my opponent draw their first card, and they played a 6. And in classic trick-taking rules, if I do have a card of the same suit, then I have to play that suit. And since 6 is the highest valued card of that suit, I'm just going to play my lowest one, and they win that trick. And whoever wins the trick gets to go again, so I'll just draw their next card, which means I can beat it with this 6 here. And since I won that trick, I would go next in the following round, but let's just pretend that didn't happen, and let's say that my opponent ended up playing this card instead. And like I said, this follows classic trick-taking rules, so if I had a fire card, I'd have to play a fire card, but I actually don't have any fire cards in my hand, so I can actually play any card from my hand that I'd like. The nice thing about this situation is that any of my water cards will beat this card, and I could just go ahead and play a 2, and it would beat that 6. But even better, these diamond cards actually act like a 1 in this game, and if you're able to win a trick with one of these cards, which I would do in this case, you actually get to take that trick, but you also get to steal one of your opponent's 1 tricks. Really fun little trick-taking game, and the game would continue like this until one player wins every single trick in a single round. And like I said, each round players are going to have 1 less card in their hand than the previous round, which is going to push the game to an end the more rounds that you play. And this next game is called The Path Ahead, and this one plays 2 to 4 players, and this one is a really simple game to play. All you're going to do is put the main deck here in the center of the table, and then you're going to have 1 card revealed, and then players are going to be taking turns guessing whether the next card is going to be higher or lower than the reveal card. I'll go first and guess that the next card is lower than this one, so let's go ahead and reveal that card. Since this is a 6, I was incorrect, and in this case, I have to take either this card or the top card of the deck into my possession, which is essentially a negative victory point at the end of the game. But now it's my opponent's turn to guess, and they're also going to guess that this next card is lower than the one revealed, and it is a 6, but since it is of an element of fire, water always beats fire, and that means that they were correct, so they just do nothing, and this becomes the next revealed card. Now let's say that the turn sequence came back to me, and this is where things get really interesting with this game, and this is what changes this game away from just being a simple guessing game. Since the card that we currently have revealed is a 6, and the previous card that I had to take into my possession is also a 6, I really want this card, which means that I want to guess incorrectly here. The reason for that is because if you ever get 2 cards of the same value or 3 cards of the same suit in your possession, you can actually discard all of those cards removing them from your possession. Since this is a 6 and that's a really high card, I'm going to go ahead and guess that the next one is lower than this card. And in this game, the diamonds do always act as a 1, but that doesn't even matter in this case because a water card always beats a fire card, which means that the water card is higher, which means that I was incorrect. But that's exactly what I wanted because now I have 2 6s in my possession, and I can just go ahead and reveal those and discard those cards to the discard pile. The game continues like this, and then at the end of the game, players are going to add up all the cards that they have in their possession, and the player with the lowest total value wins the game. And the last rule set I have for you with the system is called Arcane Artifacts. And this one plays 2 to 6 players, and it does look a little bit more advanced than the other games that I've shown you so far. And this one does also utilize this additional expansion deck, which includes all sorts of different artifact cards, which will grant special abilities to the players that are able to acquire them. But I'm not going to get into the rules on this one, and I'll leave a little bit of mystery for you to figure out on your own. And to do that, you can go ahead and check out the link to the campaign in the description below. And I do want to say that I did play all of these games with my friends, and I enjoyed every single one of them. So this is a system that I do recommend. And each of the games offer quite a bit of variety at a whole range of different player counts, which is really impressive for a system that only costs you $12. So if you are interested in this one, definitely go ahead and check it out. And don't forget, you can click to get notified once it launches. Also on the 28th, we have a new expansion as well as a reprint to the game Agemonia, which if you did miss out on the campaign, this is a great opportunity to get your hands on it. And this is a game that looks amazing. I did back the original campaign. I haven't had a chance to play it yet because I've still been playing through the 7th Citadel campaign, and I try not to have too many campaign games on at once. But part of me just wants to race through 7th Citadel so that I can get this one to the table because I am super pumped for this. This one's also been getting rave reviews from the people that have played it, so I'm actually getting FOMO for a game that I do already own. But of course I did cover this one during its original campaign, so I will go ahead and roll that previous footage for you shortly here. But first I'll just let you know what the new expansion is going to be adding. And this is called the New Heroes expansion. So of course it is going to be adding a couple new heroes into the mix that you can choose to play with, which each operate a little bit differently than all the other heroes. And there is also going to be a new story that players can play through that is community driven, meaning that it is partially fan made, but the original creators do also have their hands on it, and they're massaging it to make sure that it works within the system and that it's being properly play tested and that everything is properly balanced with it, and that includes whatever components are required to play through that story. Another new change that's coming with this campaign is that they will be officially changing some of the timers for the scenario, which essentially means that players will have more time to explore each of those given scenarios. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't start my campaign yet because I just love exploring every single corner and detail in a game that I can. And this is the feedback that their team has been receiving, so they wanted to give more time for that exploration. But of course, having a longer timer could also make those scenarios a little bit easier to play. So they're also adding in an elite enemy deck that you can use to upgrade the challenge rating of any of these scenarios. If you don't want to wait till the campaign starts, they do have all these changes listed in their forums here, so you can just go ahead and apply those changes now to your current campaign. But I do like everything I'm seeing with this new reprint campaign, and I was anticipating this campaign coming very soon. I just didn't realize it was going to be this soon, and I was hoping to play my game before jumping in on this second campaign. And I guess I still will try to do that, but with the reception this game's been getting and from my initial impressions of it before, I have a lot of confidence in this one, and it is another campaign that I definitely recommend. So if you want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. And of course, you can click to get notified. And this one is our Discord pick of the week. And Agemonia is a cooperative story-driven RPG board game that takes place in a high fantasy world, and this world has a few problems. First of all, people are discovering some strange ancient devices that seem to be powering up for unknown reasons. And these wouldn't be such an issue except for they're causing earthquakes, tidal waves, electrical storms, and a whole bunch of other cataclysmic events. On top of this, different factions are competing to harness this power for their own benefits, which happens to be throwing the whole region into a civil war. This is a campaign game, and it offers over 30 unique scenarios with some interesting features like evolving maps, and it also gives the players a lot of freedom because it's really up to you and your party to decide if you want to save Agemonia from its destruction or if you want to be its destroyer yourselves. Of course, players will be encountering different locations, monsters, puzzles, and be engaging in combat. And there's also a really neat focus on timed events that will get triggered, and if you don't complete them within enough turns, then those opportunities are going to be lost. Players will be able to develop their own individual characters by making different moral choices, and players will also be able to select the different actions that their characters have, and you'll be able to change those and upgrade them throughout the game. The campaign offers branching storylines with different variant endings for each scenario, and a really neat aspect of this is that there's the whole concept of failing forward. So if you happen to fail a scenario, it doesn't actually end the game and you don't need to reset anything. It just actually ends up taking you down one of those variant paths where you didn't happen to succeed in that scenario, which affects all the scenarios moving forward. This creates a little bit of you win some, you lose some, rather than trying to always win some. And it's also going to create a ton of variability for players like me who just love to see every outcome for every scenario. Something that I think is a real highlight of this game is the way that the map works. It's going to be using a booklet so that you have the maps already set out for you, and you don't have to piece together different tiles in order to build up your map. Completing different scenarios will send you on a path to another page in the book that's going to present you with a new map. And something you might be noticing on this map is that there's a few different icons with numbers on them, and these are called story points. And story points are actually associated with a card that's going to unfold a little bit of the story and present you with some different opportunities, challenges, and choices to make that are going to affect the rest of the game. And these are going to activate when you get within a certain distance of them, and then you're going to draw the associated card, which is going to present you with your discovery. And depending on the outcome of that card, different things can happen, including changing the form of the map. Some of the cards actually have sections of the map, and depending on the outcome, you'll have to put that card down on the map, and it's actually going to change the way that the map looks, and it's going to present some new opportunities because of that. Players are going to be fighting and completing these different skill checks by using their three main skills of might, agility, or will, and then combining that with some dice rolling. In each round, players are each going to be able to take an action, which could be things like healing, attacking, focusing, which allows extra dice rolls, or even performing additional maneuvers, which I'll explain in a second. But the way that this works is that players are actually going to be pre-deciding the actions they're going to take, and then an initiative card gets drawn that's going to dictate the player's turn order depending on the types of actions that each player took. So the initiative card actually has a list of action types, and then they get resolved in that order. If there are enemies on the board, their actions will also get executed as part of this. And then I mentioned maneuvering, which players are always able to do at least once on their turn, but you can spend your action in order to perform an additional maneuver. And maneuvering just allows players to move or recover stamina or mana, but it can be played at any time on their turn, and you aren't locked into your decision like you are with actions. And stamina is a very important resource in the game because you're going to be using it to do all the sorts of things that you're going to do, but it also doubles as your health. And I feel like the Discord community and myself are getting a little too aligned lately because this one's also my pick of the week. And as usual, there's a few reasons why I'm picking this one, but a big one is that I just think there's a ton of really great design choices. First of all, I really love to see these map books. It's a great mix of functional design. It's got some really beautiful artwork as well, and I really like how everything's broken up. It's very clean and easy to see where the different spaces are and the different icons, but it also has that sort of chaotic and natural feel to it. Of course, those are a little bit more focused on the aesthetics, although those do help streamline a game. The book itself also helps streamline the game because you don't have to go setting up complex scenarios and looking for different components and tiles. And especially for an RPG style game, this is a really nice feature to have because it really eliminates some of those inhibitions that you might have when it comes to playing the game due to the length of the setup. I also really like the fail forward aspect of the game, and I think a lot of RPGs should take notes here because it has a lot of benefits when it comes to both immersion and streamlining the game. It really gives your game an extra layer of continuity rather than breaking players out of the game world anytime something goes wrong, and it makes the game a little bit more about having fun and dealing with your failures rather than trying to get everything right in the first go. It also reduces fiddliness and streamlines your entire experience since you won't have to be resetting components and players back to certain save points in the game, and there isn't that whole aspect of having to do a complete hard reset because you did something wrong. And I think most of us would agree that it's more fun to continue moving forward rather than to reset and then do everything over again. But the nice thing is that that is still always an option if you want to play it that way. I also like how players can upgrade their actions and specialize in certain areas and change what they're good at throughout the game. And I think it's really cool how the pre-programmed actions work with the maneuvers that give you a little bit of flexibility, but then also some restrictions on every turn. And this one might be more specific to my taste when it comes to board games, but I really like how this campaign doesn't have a whole lot of flavor text. It does have quite a lot, but you're going to be reading it in bite-sized chunks. I think most of the story is actually uncovered through the story cards as you play the game, rather than reading pages and pages of story from a booklet. Also on the 28th, we have the 18 Hex Games Collections Volume 2. This one's going to be introducing 6 new hex-based games, and I'll just go through each of these really quickly here. But the first one is called The Many Dungeons. This one is a cooperative dungeon crawling experience where players are going to be trying to level up their heroes to their maximum level, and then they're going to be standing up against different dungeon lords and solving different puzzles in an adventure for 1 to 3 players. The next game is called Flipo, and this one is a fast-paced numbers game where players are going to be flipping tiles and then placing them with the goal to sum up to 10 before the other players. This game incorporates a bit of luck, memory, and pattern recognition. This is a game that you're going to be playing several times in a row because each game only takes 5 to 15 minutes, and it incorporates a bit of memory and pattern recognition as players are trying to get those appropriate tiles together. Molecule is a game where players are going to be placing tiles and trying to create the longest chained molecule of their color. You're going to be doing this by placing, swapping, and turning tiles in order to gain the advantage over your opponent. The game plays over just 6 to 9 rounds, and then the player that has the longest chain molecule at that time wins the game. Ginger Fingers is a party game that features a whole lot of different elements, and there's going to be a bunch of different minigames incorporated in this game. Some of them might feature agility, memory, or even deduction, and players will be winning these minigames to earn their team medals to hopefully win the overall Olympic Rumble. Castle Duel is a 2-player tile-based tactical wargame that also uses a bit of bluffing. The players are going to be placing their troops out on the field, attacking each other, and trying to take over their opponent's castle first in order to win the game. Finally, we have Aconteceris, which is probably a game that I'm saying incorrectly, but this one is a auto-battler style game where players are going to be building up a team that they're going to be drafting from different tiles. Then you're going to be placing them out on the battlefield and watching them fight and utilizing different combos and synergies depending on the different types of characters that you're able to pair together. And then you're going to be playing over a series of rounds, being able to manipulate your teams in various ways between rounds. Maybe not winning every battle, but you do want to try and win the war. And the reason that I went through this one really quickly is because, well, there are a lot of games to cover with this campaign, but also they do feature just 1-minute videos on their campaign that you can go ahead and watch and get a good idea of how each of these play. So if I did pique your interest with the little bit of details I did provide, you can find a link to this campaign in the description below, and of course, click to get notified. Also launching on the 28th, we have Terraria, the board game, which is a cooperative adventure game for 1 to 4 players, and of course it is based on the video game with the same name. In this game, each player is going to have their own personal deck of cards, and you're going to be using those cards to generate action points, which you can use to move around on the board, or even combine with your gear in order to perform different actions like digging tunnels, mining ore, chopping trees, and fighting different enemies. The game offers a bunch of different biomes, which is going to create a unique world every time you play the game. And each game, players are going to be working together to try and complete a set of objectives. And once you're able to do that, that's going to be triggering an epic boss showdown. Players are going to be using their gear and dice in order to attack these different bosses. And what's neat about some of these enemies is that they can actually change their form as they take damage throughout a battle. Players are going to be starting the game with just basic gear made out of copper, but you'll be able to dig and mine for ore and gems, and fight enemies to collect various loot that you'll then be able to use to craft new accessories, tools, and weapons. You'll be able to use all this to upgrade your character with powerful new armor, abilities, and buffs, and a neat thing about this is that the game provides clear sheets that you'll be able to lay over your character card in order to indicate those upgrades. Players will also be able to use those various resources and actions in order to build up a base and unlock new crafting opportunities, and also to spawn helpful NPCs that they'll be able to take advantage of, with each of them offering a different bonus for the players to use. There's not a whole lot more info on the finer details of the gameplay at the time of me filming this video, but I will have a link to the campaign in the description below, and of course you can check that out to learn more about the game, and of course follow along if this one does sound interesting. And also launching on the 28th, we have a new expansion to the game, All Time Wrestling, and this one is called the Abu Dhabi Rumble. This one is a standalone expansion to the existing game, and it's going to introduce new game modes like Versus and a free-for-all, but it will also introduce some new characters and some new mechanisms as well. If you're not familiar with the original all-time wrestling game, the reason it has that name is because this actually features both real and made-up wrestlers from all points in time. Each wrestler does have their own asymmetric deck of cards, and players are just going to be selecting a subset of those cards to start the game out with, and when you're selecting those, you just have to stay within a certain total damage amount. During a turn, you're going to be spending energy to play attack cards from your hand, and there might be a skill check as part of that attack in order to determine if it's a success. Landing a success not only deals the damage, but it can also gain you momentum, which makes skill checks easier for any additional cards that you play in that combo. Chaining cards is possible by matching certain icons and keywords together, so that might be a consideration when you're deciding which cards that you want to start out with at the beginning of the game, and then also which cards you want to add into your hand as you get opportunities to upgrade your deck. Players will also have different finishing moves that they can use to pin down their opponents, and if you get pinned in this game, you're going to have to roll a skill check in order to get out of it, and that skill check requires you to roll a value below your current health, which means that the more damaged you are when you do get pinned, the more difficult it's going to be to get out of it. There are also ways that you can permanently discard cards from your hand, and if you lose all of your cards, then you will lose the game. And the game also offers a campaign mode that introduces a whole lot of variety from game to game, and of course a ton of opportunities for players to level up their wrestler and make things a little bit more interesting with each subsequent game. If this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. I'll have it linked down below. Also launched on the 28th, we have Neverrift, which is a competitive tactical card game, and the way this game works is that each player is going to be choosing a faction to play as, and they're going to have a specific ability as well as their own deck of cards that you're going to be drawing from. This is going to make each of them play a little bit differently and create a lot of variability depending on who you're playing as well as your opponents. But in this game, each player is going to be managing a hand of 6 cards, and there's going to be a few different cards you can have in this game, but the main ones are the creatures. And you're going to be trying to control the most creatures by the end of the game. And when you put a creature out, it does belong to you, but what's really interesting about this game is that other players can actually steal your creatures if they're able to deal enough damage to it. The way this is done is by marking each of the creatures with a token, with each of the tokens being associated with each of the individual players. On a turn, you're going to be drawing a card from your deck and then playing a card to any of the open spaces out on the board. If it's a creature, it's going to have that attack power as well as potentially some special abilities, and you'll be able to use those abilities to manipulate other areas on the board or attack other creatures within range, hopefully taking them into your own possession. Other than that, there are location cards which affect other cards on the board, and they might add boost to the cards around them or even allow you to destroy other cards, removing them from the board. Spells work similar to the locations, but instead of playing these ones out onto the board, they're going to be giving you a special ability that you can just use on your turn, and you're allowed to use any amount of spell cards that you'd like. These just get discarded once they're used, but they do give you a nice little advantage, so you do want to be strategic with them. The game just continues like this, with players playing cards into the board, using those locations and spell cards in order to augment their turn in various ways. Then once the board's completely full, the game's going to come to an end, and then the player that has the most control out on the board is going to be the winner of the game. But if there is a tie, then it's the player who played last that loses, because they do also have the advantage of the final say. So if they're not able to tip the scales in their favor in that final turn, then they are the loser of the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked in the description down below. And launching on the 29th, we have Dungeon Pen, and this one is a game where players are going to be starting on the opposite ends of a dungeon map, and then you're going to be navigating through the dungeon and trying to take the opponent's treasure and returning it back to your home base. This is a game that uses pencil flicking in order to maneuver your character across a sheet of paper, because this one is sort of like a roll and write, but each turn you're also going to be drawing an event card, and then you're going to immediately resolve the effects of that card, which could allow you to do things like draw different walls out on the board and manipulate the map in various ways. There's also different monsters that can spawn and get in the player's way, and players can also collect different debris that they find out on the map, which allows them to draw from the debris deck. And this will grant them with special abilities and gear that they can use to tilt the scales in their favor. I don't have a whole lot more on this one, but if you want to check it out, I do have it linked down below. And launching on May 29th, we have Cysmic, which is a sci-fi strategy war game. And this one is a game that did launch previously on Kickstarter, and it did fund, but they did decide to pull it down to make some improvements. And they have done that, adding some new modes of play like solo mode, a Euro mode, and a co-op mode. And they have also managed to reduce the price as well. But because this one did already launch on Kickstarter, I have already covered this one in detail, so I'll just go ahead and roll that previous footage for you now, and if you're interested, you can go ahead and find a link to their new campaign in the description down below. And this is a competitive game that takes place on a crumbling planet, and players are going to be competing to build their spaceship and be the first to evacuate their people off-world. The game plays over a series of rounds where each player is going to get 5 turns per round, and each turn you'll be able to play 1 unit card or 1 tactic card in order to perform your actions, and the different actions will allow you to recruit different units, manage your economy, fight your opponents, and explore and gather resources in order to construct your colony ship. But something that's really interesting about this game is that every single player has something that another player wants, because every player only knows how to build one part of their ship. And in order to build the other parts of your ship, you're either going to have to extort or trade with your opponents in order to convince them to divulge their secrets. And a really nice mechanism here that's going to allow players to get within negotiation distance of their enemies really quickly is that on each side of the board there are arrows of different colors. And whenever you leave the board on one of those arrows, you'll be able to come in at any other part of the board that matches the color of those arrows. And this is just a nice way to bridge the gap between all the different players so that no matter where you start on the board, each of your enemies is roughly the same distance away. And whichever player is able to successfully build the ship first is going to be the one that wins the game. There's no victory points here, so if you are a fan of that, this is one you'll want to check out, and I have links in the description below. And launch on the 30th, we have an expansion for the game Warline, which is called Dragon's War, and if you're not familiar with the original game, this is a tactical war game where players are going to be playing as different factions with different strengths and weaknesses, and players are going to be using dice as their units out on the board, and the value of that die indicates their strength as well as their health, but a lower value die doesn't necessarily mean it's a worse unit, because these dice are going to have more options and abilities for you to take advantage of, whereas the stronger dice are going to be a little bit more tanky. But you're going to be using your actions to move around your units and take advantage of their various abilities, and of course you can attack your opponents, and when you do that you're going to be comparing the values of their dice, and the player with the higher value is going to be the one to win that battle, but of course you can augment this by using various cards from your hand. The player can win the game if they're able to defeat all their opponent's units or take over their opponent's stronghold. This new expansion is going to be adding a solo mode as well as a 2-player cooperative expansion for the original game, and it's also going to be introducing some new factions and of course new special abilities to take advantage of. And if you are interested to learn more, I will have this one linked down below. And that's everything I have this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce, and you don't want to miss out on these ones because, well, they're the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you got to do is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that, although I do appreciate it. And also we're going to be offering 2 giveaways for a pledge for Ironwood, which means 2 opportunities to win this game. One of them I'm going to do as usual in the comment section down below, and the other one we're going to give away over on the Discord, and all you got to do to enter that is check out the link to the Discord in the description below, head over to the giveaways channel, and then click the little emoji underneath that giveaway. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is the next game offered from Mindclash Games, and this is a 2-player head-to-head game where each player is going to be playing as their own asymmetrical faction. This is also a game that utilizes area control, where a player is going to be moving around the forest and then the other player is going to be moving around the mountains. You always do remain in your terrain, but you can attack anyone that's adjacent to you. The game uses an action card system for players to perform their actions, and each of the factions do have their own unique deck of cards as well as a few other differences with their units, and each of the factions do have their own endgame conditions that cause them to win the game. This one's been getting a ton of positive reception, and I also did make it my pick of the week last week because I think this one looks amazing, so you'll definitely want to enter in this giveaway and also check out the campaign if you haven't already. And what's neat about this campaign is that it actually is more of a pre-order, and they will be fulfilling those pledges in only a few months. But this giveaway is going to be for a copy of the game and the promo pack bundle, and to enter this giveaway, all you gotta do is leave a comment down below. You can say anything that you want, just make sure to put in the hashtag Ironwood, and if you are looking for something in particular, you can let us know if you prefer the mountains or the forest. And the next giveaway we have is for a copy of Dance of the Muses, and this one's going to be ending in just a few days here, so if you do want to check it out, make sure to rush over to the campaign now. But this one is a really interesting tile placement and movement game where players are going to be placing out different tiles of Muses with their die on that tile. And as they move tiles, it's going to be activating their special abilities that will manipulate the other tiles and dice around them. The overall goal here is to try and have as many of your dice as high as a value as possible. And a neat detail with moving the tiles in this game is that they do push any of the tiles in front of them. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe edition of the game, which gets you the base game as well as the deluxe upgrades. And to enter this giveaway, all you got to do is leave a comment down below with the hashtag Muse, M-U-S-E, or I guess it's pronounced Muse. And you can say anything that you want, but I guess if you're familiar with Greek mythology, maybe you could tell us what your favorite Greek mythological story is. Good luck in the giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, which we had a pledge for Feudum as well as the Amsterdam board game design season 1. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Ko-fi subscribers. And if you do want to support the channel, you can find a link to that in the description down below, and I really do appreciate it. But I'm just going to go ahead and get straight to the giveaway here before I mess up the giveaways like I have each and every one of the past weeks. So let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the first giveaway here is going to be for Feudum. And the winner is Justin Harriman, who is one of our Ko-fi subscribers. So congratulations on the win. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won a sweet pledge here. Now let's draw the winner for the Amsterdam board game design season 1. So same thing here. Let's pick another winner. And the winner is Felix, who is also from Ko-fi, so congratulations on the win. Once again, I will reach out to you if I don't hear from you, but feel free to email me at adam@shelfclutter.com. That's it for this week, and I don't really have too much else to say other than I do appreciate you stopping by and checking out this video, and I hope there was some useful information here for you, and maybe even a game or two that you might want to check out. But either way, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.